Hi there. Thanks for joining this session on DevSecOps best practices. It's no secret threat actors and cloud attacks have evolved and are smarter than ever, especially with the prevalence of AI. Yet traditional security responses have languished, much to the detriment of many organizations. In this session, I'm thrilled to host my colleague Chaz, who's been a cybersecurity practitioner and consultant for Fortune 500 companies as well as federal agencies. We're going to explore your cloud threat detection challenges and how to approach threat detection better using a real world incident response example that frankly hit close to home at Sumo Logic. Jess?
Nice. Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me. And like you said, I think this session's going to be unique in the sense that we're really not just talking about theoreticals, but we're going to pull back the curtains a little bit and share a real world example from a recent security incident that we had here at Sumo. And you don't often see that kind of transparency. Sumo Logic is a security vendor, but we also happen to be monitoring our own environment using some of the technology that we built. So it'll be unique in that sense. And we're doing this in the spirit of sharing back with the community, the security community, because ultimately I think as the more companies can share, the better we all get as defenders. And like I
Absolutely.
always say, we're all good guys, we're all defending, so let's share as much as possible.
Brilliant. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so
Your cybersecurity chops is second to none.
yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for more years than I care to count. A lot of it was spent in the federal space doing SIM and SOC consulting, all of the different three-letter agencies. I also, as a civilian, spent a few years on the NSA Red Team. And if you're familiar with them, they do adversarial emulation, full scope penetration type work. So I've seen it from the attacker side and I've seen it from the defender side. And the challenge is real, right? The cat and mouse game is brutal. And so yeah, well, I think we'll have some good insights to share from this conversation.
I love it. I'm Rowan Arona, just joined Sumo Logic as their Senior Director of Product Marketing for their security division. I've had over 20 years of experience in understanding what to build and then how to take that to market for both Fortune 500 organizations as well as some of Silicon Valley's best unicorns. This was my third tour of duty for cybersecurity. I love it. I mean, it's
Nice.
so prevalent, it's so needed, and what a great space to be in. And as such, I returned. I formerly used to work with Entrust Data Card on their data protection side, and then with Zix, which is now part of OpenText. But I'm so happy to be at Sumo Logic.
Welcome
Let's
back to
get
the
to it, Jeff.
trenches. Welcome back to the trenches. Hopefully you don't regret it.
Loving it so far, loving it so far. So let, let's get to it. Chaz, you've had experience with both customers large and small. Can you share what you're hearing from our customers on what threats keep them up at night?
Yeah, and this list is actually quite good. I think they got this from Dark Reading 2023 article. But this really is kind of the cybersecurity greatest hits. And to be honest, although we are a security vendor, Sumo Logic as a company is not very dissimilar to many of the customers that we serve, right? We are a cloud native company with an application that generates our revenue, and that application is something that we have to protect, right? So security fundamentals are, critical for us. And these things that you see on the screen, they're the same things that are keeping us up at night, right? We're not in a different position than anyone else. And as I look through this list, there's so much to talk about here. We can just pick a few, like supply chain risk for sure is top of mind for a lot of people, primarily because it's been in the headlines. And no matter how good you build a security program, no matter how good you are implementing controls, you can still be blindsided, right? Because there's an inherent
Absolutely.
trust. Yeah, you can bring in software you didn't build, you thought it was secure. There's a new attack vector, right? So it's scary. The human error one there, that's the bottom of the list, is similar in the sense that we're all humans, right? And a business is built on human, right? And so there's missteps, there's misconfigurations that happened, or that can happen. And as you mentioned, as we kind of deconstruct the security incident that we went through here at Sumo Logic, it really started with human error, right? And that's something that's very difficult to prevent.
So these seem like persistent problems we've been struggling with for quite some time. Why is that?
I think the fundamentals of security don't change. Um, what's changing is the velocity. And so, you build a SecOps team, and now it's very difficult. And really, it's if you back out like to the 10,000-foot view, businesses are moving at the speed of innovation or the speed of cloud. And so, as they try and innovate and gain a competitive advantage, they're releasing products to market. Natural side effect to that is the attack surface gets broader. The environments that we're protecting get more complex. And so you see the pain points there on the screen, right? There's too many alerts. And you hear that quite frequently. I think it's actually a misnomer. I would say it's not an alert volume problem, it's an alert fidelity problem, because if you can improve the fidelity alerts, they'll naturally reduce in volume, because that means you're pruning out false positives, and no action type alerts. Um, we don't have time to talk about all of these, but certainly not enough resources is a real pain, not just in people resources, human resources, but also in technology. Some of these solutions come at a hefty price, and then you have to have the resources to implement them. The complexity of the tools are also a problem. So, right, like you said, these pain points have been around. I don't think they're going away, but they are definitely evolving. On the DevOps side, it's a little bit different, right? Because they're the ones building they're the builders, and the industry is really pushing to shift left, right? Embed visibility at the lowest level at the design stage, which is huge. It's amazing, to have that occur. And I think DevOps was coined in maybe 2012 or so by Gartner, and we're still not there, and it's a process, it's a journey that it's not like one day you wake up and say, okay, we've achieved DevSecOps today, or zero trust, or whatever framework you talk about. It's a continuous improvement process. So what we're really talking about in this session today is, how do you blend SecOps with DevOps, right? And democratize that security across teams, across business units, and do it in a way that's effective. And it'll be interesting to see, how we dig into this, in a lessons learned kind of way.
And have you seen the progress towards DevSecOps over the last, especially the last few years?
I would say for sure, yes. We'll talk about it a little bit more, but I think we're only now at a point where technology is catching up to where we need to be, right?
Hmm.
Because we didn't have the ability to scale, to be blunt, to be honest. In my early days of SIM, which was, I'm gonna, what do you call it? Age myself here a little bit, but it was using ArcSight, and you had to deploy, you had to rack and stack these massive storage units, and it was very brittle. And if you used it wrong, or you had too many people log on, it would fall over. How do you do DevSecOps in a world like that? Now, fast forward to today, where there's so many powerful SaaS applications, and we're doing analytics at scale in the cloud. You can have as many users in the system at once, simultaneously doing analytics. That lends itself to better cross collaboration, which is what we saw, firsthand from what happened.
Brilliant. So for threat detection in a DevSecOps world, um, what are the core tenets? What are the keys to ensure success?
Yeah, so if you want to advance the slide, I'll kind of talk through these. So the first one is that single source of truth. Um, and when we were talking about this topic, right? There was a couple of different titles, and one of them was, many sources, one truth, many subject matter experts, but one team. And what that captures is, um, everybody needs to be, or needs to have accessible the same telemetry, right? And get that visibility needed, because without that, you haven't left the starting gate. So that's kind of the fundamental starting point. And then this, this plays right into it. All the data you can muster. Now this comes at a cost, right? It's easy to just say, give me all the data. It's not that simple. At Sumo Logic, we do some innovative things to help, help match the budget, right, with our $0 ingest, which is unique to the market, but also just the way we can date it here. Ultimately, you have to determine, how do I get as much data into the hands of my users and stakeholders, so that when things hit the fan, you have what you need, right, to do that root cause analysis. And that's, the metrics that we're always looking to reduce is MTTR, MTTD, get that rapid decision making, that rapid response down. And fundamentally, it all happens with data. And yeah, all teams working together. It sounds simple. And Rowan, I know you've been around and worked in a lot of organizations. It is not as simple as you would think. During our incident, we had over 100 different people, involved in it, and there's a lot of logistics, just the communication aspect and tool sharing. And so it's better to get ahead of this problem so that you know how to collaborate and work together before it's crunch time. So yeah. And then I think that falls right in line, communicate cross-functionally. That's a given. AI is interesting, right? I think, especially as we roll up on RSA and some of the other, vendor shows, AI is a game changer in so many different ways. It's being embedded at every level of IT. And what I tell our customers, is be aggressive, right? Do it responsibly, but be aggressive with its adoption, because if you're not doing that, your business will get left behind, right? That means use AI in your security team, or in your security operations. Use it in your development shop, like allow Copilot and all the other tools. Use it in your business intelligence. If you're not using AI, you'll be swallowed up by those that move faster than you.
So here at Sumo Logic, we see a DevSecOps world as interwoven with this, the various day-to-day functions, scenarios each team performs. They're in their own little racetrack, as you can see here. But also the continuous collaboration and data sharing that's needed when other scenarios demand everyone
Mhm.
working together on the same page, gathering all the context they can with the workflows and automation to move quickly. Can you just get a little bit more specific with some of these scenarios and why it's relevant to our audience?
Yeah, when I first saw this graphical representation of DevSecOps, I really liked it, primarily because it shows clearly every team has a different on-ramp, right? Every team has a different um, perspective. And, the developers are viewing data and they're viewing that digital exhaust in one way. The operations team is viewing it a different way, and the security team is using it a different way. Ultimately, though, what we need to drive towards is everybody can on ramp and can cycle around and not only view the data in a consolidated, aggregated way, but also use that data store, or that, I'll call it a security data lake, in a way that facilitates that collaboration. With Sumo Logic during our incident, I guess I'll just get into it here, make it a little more real world. And this happened last November, right? It the the initial um, security events of interest were identified, in fact, by our site reliability engineers, right? They weren't identified by our security operations team, which is, that's interesting when you think about it, because, and we'll, like I said, we'll deconstruct a little bit about what happened, but they have a lot of really good telemetry, primarily in the way of CloudTrail data, right? Sumo Logic is built on AWS technologies, and there's a lot of data streaming in. And it was because they do periodic reviews and visualizations of this data that they noticed something that was unusual, right? And we, in a sense, drink our own champagne, right? We run Sumo Logic for other customers, but we also run Sumo Logic to monitor ourselves, as you can imagine. I think we get a good discount on it. I'm not sure. But anyway, so we're drinking our champagne in that sense. And the SREs noticed that, and that trip, that incident response plan, which they really said, okay, let's throw this over to the developers, let's throw it over to the security team, and get all hands on deck.
Yeah, and so even Chaz, you said this at the start. Even as a security vendor, we're not exempt from human error and missteps. So during this recent incident, uh, you know, our DevSecOps practices and culture, frankly, procedures, along with our people and technology, was brought to bear. Many in the market lauded our response to it, and I'm going to quote Jason here from Sequence Security. No incidents is good news, but look how quickly and cleanly the response from Sumo Logic security team was orchestrated. Again, this goes back to ensuring that you look at DevSecOps as not just a procedure, a practice. It's a culture. It's a cultural approach to how you tackle security. So I know you were part of that response team. What can you share as far as lessons learned?
Yeah, so it like you said, it's an unfortunate situation to be in, to be, in some ways in the security headlines. But the good can come out of it for sure. For example, we're talking about it today and kind of sharing some of the lessons learned back to the community. But also, I think the way that you handle security incidents tells a lot about the culture that you just described perfectly. And it can actually build trust with your customers, rather than erode that trust. And so I would definitely say for customers or organizations that are out there, um, err on the side of transparency whenever possible. And maybe the lawyers in the room will try and push back a little bit there, but I think you can usually find a good medium where you share as much as possible, and then they can understand what are the internal processes and controls that we have in place, to mitigate if it happens, or remediate, in that scenario. So what actually did happen, during a periodic code review, and they're looking at that CloudTrail activity, um, that I mentioned before, they also review use of all the credentials, right? And so when you can visualize a large amount of data, sometimes those outliers start to surface. And it ended up being, like I said, that human error where there was use of credentials outside of Sumo Logic policy, right? Static credentials being embedded in maybe a GitHub repository. And fortunately, it was a non-production account, but it still happened. And there are tools to be aware of, like Trufflehog. It's worth doing a little bit of homework on. It's actively scanning, your environment, or all public GitHub repositories, and it's looking for those human missteps, right? And if there's credentials out there, it will identify them, and it can even automate away hey, check to see if this secret or this key is still live and accessible, and then report that back. In some cases, the developers use it in a responsible way, right, to protect themselves, but other ways, tools like Trufflehog can be used by the adversary. Um, so yeah, that was identified immediately. They started to dig deeper into our environment, which is primarily through the log analytics. And as we showed on the previous screen, um, you have to have the logs to begin with, right? So I would be asking yourself, and this is coming from a lessons learned background, right? Do we have the logs that we need to do this kind of analytics, when we have to, quote unquote, like break glass and fire off this incident response process? What is the data retention of those logs? do the right people have access to those logs? Those are all questions that need to be asked. Another one that's often missed is, does the solution that you're built on, right, your analytics solution, have the ability to scale up to, full, 5 alarm security incident levels? Within Sumo Logic, when this happens and you have members from the security team and the operations team and the development team all trying to query the same data at the same time, that's a heavy workload, right? You could be scanning as far back as 30, 60, 90 days or more. And if everybody's running that query at the same time, your solution needs to be able to scale up to that. So fortunately, Sumo Logic, that's one of its primary use cases, but certainly do that testing during the calm morning hours, not in the stress of the, in the thick of it, I would say. Um, I grabbed a few screenshots here just to show a little bit about, how, like I said, we use Sumo Logic to monitor our own environment, which is great, and it's to our advantage. But we have some of that outlier detection built in, right? So you've got API key or API endpoints out there, services that are interacting. It's nice to be able to have an intelligent way to identify outliers, right? And so we do that baselining. If you click to the next screen, it's another way you can visualize it in our search analytics interface, but it's constantly looking, okay, what's the normal threshold that I would expect to see, at this time of day? And it's hard to see on the screen there, but when you see those pink triangles pop, that's the outlier, right? That might indicate, hey, there was a compromised service, somebody's doing reconnaissance, it might warrant further investigation. And this could be anything, especially CloudTrail logs, right? Yep, go ahead. So what happened in our case, as soon as the SRE team identified that, they alerted the dev team. And so they both, and you can see it depicted in the arrows there, they pulled the fire alarm and they said, hey, this looks odd. Let's look at it together. Again, as I stated before, everybody was able to log in. Solutions, and we're not the only ones certainly, but solutions like Sumo Logic fortunately are unlimited users, unlimited search, unlimited dashboard. So everybody was able to get in and start to review these CloudTrail logs. Now, this is where it gets fun, and this is kind of where it moves into my lane. The security team gets involved, and now they're looking and they're peeling it back a little bit more, and they're saying, okay, what kind of signals have we seen? I like to take a look at it from an entity-centric view, which is let's evaluate all the credentials and the secrets and how they were used by the different entities and see if anything stands out or is odd. The other thing that I always recommend is try and operationalize the MITRE attack tactics and techniques, right? So truffle hog secret scanning, right, would fall under one of those categories. But when you start to label all of your different signals, it helps you in the heat of the moment, but it also helps you do that gap analysis to determine, why didn't we catch this? Is there blind spots according to MITRE attack tactics and techniques that we need to cover and get ahead of it, right? That shifting left again. I think I grabbed a screenshot if you want to go forward one. Yeah, so this is what you see in our product, where every single signal we generate, we try to attach some metadata enrichments or tags, and you can see the signals being generated. And the bluer the color, the better it is. The darker the color might mean that there's a visibility gap or a posture gap. Worth doing a tabletop exercise maybe every few weeks to review this, and see if there's anything that you can do to increase your, I would say, I guess, security posture. Yeah, go to the next slide. So what did we do, right? So obviously there was a leakage of secrets. Immediately kicked off the war room, started some Slack channels. It's funny because Slack and Teams or pick your flavor, they're so important that it's got its own category now, right? Chat ops, and it's critical that you leverage these to the full extent, right? Get a room set up, start sharing queries, start sharing telemetry that you collected in that Slack channel. War game it out, right? When I was on the red team, we would have kind of a bird's eye view and to see how teams effectively responded. And the ones that fell were the ones that didn't have good communication at the outset, right? So make sure those channels of communications are open. Try to have a break glass SOP or protocol so that, hey, if this ever happens, these are the steps. And you follow it, create a war room, create a Slack channel, start to bring in different subject matter experts from the different teams. Now, some of this we don't need to cover. As you would expect, we have a lot of different logs to go through, and that's why people have SIMs in the first place. But we're combing through Okta logs. We're looking for that anomalous behavior. Anytime you can cross correlate across your security stack, I think that's really where you start to win, right? Because not every solution has the same visibility, and it's all about correlating on that entity basis across the tools. So the dev team is interesting, right? So in our case, and now what we're getting into here a little bit now is more of the response, like what did we actually do? Sumo Logic, we house a lot of very critical system or sensitive data, right? For financial, for healthcare, for federal government. We're a FedRAMP certified solution. And so as you can imagine, we're very protective of that data. Immediately that team started a process of rotating all of our internal keys and passwords. Now, they in fact did this before root cause analysis was completed, meaning they had that procedure that I talked about, that break glass protocol, and they tripped the alarm and they said, all right, we don't know yet how broad or wide this blast radius is, but let's follow the procedures and rotate all of our internal keys and passwords. Fortunately for us, we definitely over rotated on our response, but that may not always be the case. The other thing we did was and I mentioned this earlier, we communicated with our customers and in fact made the same recommendations to them, right? Rotate all of your keys. If you have webhooks that are tied into Sumo Logic, go ahead and replace those or regenerate those secrets. When I did, I met with dozens of customers, right? Any customer that wanted to meet with us and walk through the incident, we did that. And this was after the fact. And many of them said, we spend a lot of hours swapping out our keys and changing passwords. And then when root cause was determined in the final report, you told us that that wasn't necessary. And, my answer was, we didn't know initially, right? And I would say that's a best practice we should all follow if possible. Cast the net very wide.
Yeah.
And if you look, we have a security incident response page, and if you want some light reading, you can watch this drama unfold in real time as we update it, every hour a day. Um, but every business should have that SRC page where you can post updates, and you'll go, but if you want to go back and look, right, there's the initial recommendation, and then we walked it back and said, okay, that's not actually necessary, it was non-production, and we kind of continue to narrow that down. But I would say, that's a best practice and definitely a lesson learned. Err on the side of caution until you have enough evidence otherwise. And then go back one more slide. I think there was another bullet point. Yeah, the go-to-market teams. I think we can cover that. So go ahead. So here's where the tooling really comes to play. The blast radius is really important, and understanding if there was a compromised credential, how quickly can you determine everything that was touched? And we have what's called a relationship graph that we can visually view that. There's a lot of ways to do this, but this is kind of our flavor of it. Go ahead and show that screen. So what you're seeing on screen here, and this is just an example from our demo environment, but this is an IP address. Now assume that that was compromised or could be just as easily a user account. What are all the different systems that we're logged into? What are the workstations and the IP addresses involved? and be able to pivot around that makes all the difference, right? Because now within the context of this security incident, I can click on, in this case, if I'm reading it small, but Rico Dynamite, okay, let's move to Rico Dynamite. What is his workstation? Where else did he log into? And as I talked earlier about being able to drill down and do that root cause analysis, a lot of it is the ability to visually display that attack life cycle in a way that just, you don't want to just be running queries and doing it textually all the time. Certainly that's powerful, but there are also ways to view that data. All right, so I think we're getting kind of to the final steps of what happened. So here, we you have to be independent in your findings in a way that, like, we brought in third party help as early as possible. Malware, Jake Williams, he's well known in the industry. He's part of IANS. He was sitting side by side with some of our analysts. And it's really, I would say, just to provide that validation that it's easy to make a claim like, oh yeah, we looked and there was nothing wrong. But when you bring in a third party assessor or support, I think that speaks a little bit more. We also brought in a full cyber risk firm to help. And they talk about investigation bias. If you read some of the recent, like the attacks that happened to some of the larger casinos, you may make some wrong assumptions simply because that's the world that you live in and you're biased with your own solution, but you bring in a third party and they can look at it in a slightly different way. So definitely consider that if you're in the unfortunate position to be going through this. There's a lot of great choices out there for third-party assessments or support, I could say. And now, so post-mortem, one of the findings that came out of this is our Sumo Logic Threat Labs team. They actually write all of our rules, and we've got 900 plus rules. They wrote a truffle hog rule, right? It just so happens that out of the box, the user agent string, when you're using a tool like a reconnaissance tool like truffle hog, it's clear as day, right? Well, if you don't have a rule that's detecting that, you're kind of blind. Somebody might be scanning your code repositories with a tool like truffle hog, and you're not even aware of it, right? So Sumo Logic Threat Labs team quickly comes in, creates a new rule. We've now come full circle from having an incident to improving our detection approach, right? Now that rule becomes a real-time correlation alert if it were to happen again. And certainly, this is a little bit in the weeds, but user agent strings are easy to spoof, so it's certainly not a be-all end-all detection approach, but it's definitely one that you want, right? And so we'll create that rule, we'll share it back out to the community. And the other thing I would say too is make sure you have other tripwires, right? Back to that, looking at what's abnormal across this credential usage. You can't always rely on static rules to identify malicious behavior, and that reality will probably never change.
Thank you. Again, treating DevSecOps as a culture, you can see why. There's a lot of steps involved. There's a lot of collaboration, cross-functional communication required. And it starts with the log. So as I mentioned earlier, with public comments like that from Jason from Sequence Security, our customers, the media, regarded our incidents management and communication approach during this as a best practice. And so let's recap. What are the lessons learned from how we approach this? Number one, having a trusted single source of truth pays dividends. Number two, won't know what logs you'll need until you need them. The power of logs. Number three, incident response is a team sport. DevSec, ops, marketing, finance, legal. That means everyone needs to be responsible and have skin in the game. Number four, setting communication expectations early on made things smooth. So bifurcate your comms. Keep practitioners separate from execs, PR, sales. Next, don't assume. your
Whoops, did it?
automated tools. Sorry?
Oh, I was just saying, I think we were one click behind, but go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
You're good
Don't
now.
assume your automated tools are working as expected. Next, validating an absence of investigation bias demonstrates credibility. And finally, despite budget cuts and business shifts, security still needs to be done and threats are still existent, especially now with the advent of AI.
And I go back one slide. I want to kind of double click on that. It doesn't always have to be a huge monetary investment. And this is just, a little bit in the trenches where I've been previously, but when I was at the Department of Commerce as one of their SOC architects, we came up with an innovative approach that's quite simple, actually. We called it pink teaming instead of red teaming. And essentially, what we did was inject artificial or spoofed logs into the log stream to watch how the analysts respond, right? Watch how the collaboration, as we've described here in this session, occurs, and then do kind of like a grade at the end, right? Even though it wasn't a real attack and you're not paying for an expensive red team, to emulate the adversary, you could certainly simulate that just through log injection. And that, number three, incident is a team sport. How long did it take the analyst to pick up on the alert? How
Great
long
point.
did it take for him to reach out to the development team, the operations team, the system owner? And that's an easy thing that anybody could start doing tomorrow, right? Just grab a few logs, put them into the stream, and quietly sit back and watch, right? It's quite fun to do, actually.
Brilliant. And as our customers and our audience is going down their own DevSecOps journey, please, Chaz, share your top 5 tips for their own journey.
All right, well, let's go through them. So yeah, investing in a central platform that facilitates healthy collaboration, I think that horse is dead. Like, it's so important. And that's why we're reiterating it over and over, is you have to have that single source of truth. Make sure you evaluate tools that automate as much away as possible. Everyone is resource constrained. Get tools that are intelligent, that actually save you time versus additional overhead. We just don't have the appetite for that. Um, Again, back to the pink teaming approach that I just described. Test, test, test again. There's a lot of ways to test. Um, don't wait until crisis occurs for you to determine, do you have the right processes in place? Do you have the right technology in place? Do you have the right collaboration tools in place, right? Test it beforehand. Um, yeah, war rooming before and after, doing that lessons learned. Um, you know, the perfect, in a perfect world, right? You've got this continuous improvement loop that goes from threat hunters to detection engineers, all the way back to the developers. So you're always improving your detection approach, and doing that in a continuous way. Train your staff and teams for that rainy day, right? Um, this is an art, right? There's, if you look up chaos engineering or, failure Friday approaches, like, figure out a way to determine what can go wrong and then see how you can plan and actually simulate it. So yeah, at the end of the day, like, I guess we can circle back around to what we did. So certainly Sumo Logic was not the only tool that we used during our own incident response, but it was invaluable for us. And it I think the use cases are quite diverse, right? Troubleshooting and monitoring at the heart of it, bringing in that cloud SIM, bringing in that cloud infrastructure visibility. If you want to learn more about how we use our own tool, certainly reach out to us, and we can talk you through customer use cases. I think our website has a great library of use cases, in the
Absolutely.
different verticals, right? Financial, healthcare, federal, and you can see how Sumo Logic made a difference for them.
And in my brief time here, I've spoken to quite a few customers, and it comes back to these 5 key points as to how they get value from us. It's the high performance search, cloud native scale, $0 ingest for any logs, which really provides them with this single source of truth using a single SaaS platform that provides AI-driven insights. And so if you don't want to just hear it from us, there's a third party that did a report for us, IDC, on the business value of Sumo Logic, and you can learn about the 376% ROI and 4-month payback period went for customers who have actually purchased Sumo Logic. So check out that report. That brings us to the end of our time here. Thank you so much for joining us. Learn more about our security offerings and check out our latest thinking really on how AI will impact cybersecurity in our blog section under our resources page. Till next time, thanks, Chaz, for the lovely and pragmatic insights and the walkthrough. Till next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron.